The sirens were close now, close enough to count 3 separate wails stacking on top of each other. Through the kitchen window, blue and red lights pulsed against the neighbor's siding. The air smelled wrong, scorched flesh, melted plastic, something chemical underneath that caught in my throat. I raised both hands before they told me to, palms out, fingers trembling. Everything I did for him. 3 weeks earlier, I pulled into my driveway at 4:17 on a Wednesday afternoon, and my garage door wouldn't open. My key wouldn't fit the new lock. My husband opened the door wearing the gray Henley I'd bought him for Christmas, and he wouldn't meet my eyes. "We need to talk," he said. What followed was a divorce that was never really a divorce. It was a war over a 5-year-old boy, fought between 2 women who each believed they were his real mother. One of them was right. The other was willing to burn everything down rather than admit she wasn't. The Divorce by Freida McFadden. Episode 1. The Door That Wouldn't Open. The sirens are close now, close enough that I can count at least 3 separate wails stacking on top of each other. Through the kitchen window, the blue and red lights pulse against the neighbor's siding. I could run. The back door is 6 steps away, and the alley behind the garage is dark. But my legs won't move. The air smells wrong. Scorched flesh, melted plastic, something chemical underneath it that catches in my throat. A voice I don't recognize shouts from the front yard. Then another. I raise both hands before they tell me to, palms out, fingers trembling. The bracelets will be cold. They'll ask questions I cannot answer without sounding insane or evil or both. So I stand in the middle of my kitchen, her kitchen, the one I used to call mine, and I let them come. Everything I did for him. I hope someday someone believes that. A door that won't open. 3 weeks earlier, I pulled into my driveway at 4:17 on a Wednesday afternoon and knew something was wrong before I touched the brake. The garage door didn't open. Jeremy had installed that intelligent garage door 3 years ago, the kind that senses the car and rolls up at the exact moment to avoid clipping the front fender. He'd demonstrated it to me the day it was installed, standing in the driveway with his arms crossed, that satisfied smile he wore whenever technology did exactly what Head paid for. "Smarter than you are," Head said then, and it hadn't stung, because back then it was the kind of joke you make when everything else in the marriage is solid. But today the door stayed shut. My son Teddy's voice piped up from the back seat. "Mommy, is the door broken?" I turned. Teddy Roth, 5 years old, still in his white karate uniform with a great juice stain on the sleeve I hadn't been able to get out. His SpongeBob backpack sat in the seat beside him like a loyal dog. "It's not broken," I said, even though I had no idea. "Well, use the front door." I grabbed my keys, helped Teddy out of his car seat, and walked him up the front path. That's when I saw the lock. It was new, shiny brass where the old one had been rubbed silver by years of keys. I stared at it for a long moment. Teddy tugged at my hand. "Four." "Mommy, I'm hungry." "1 second, baby." I slid my key into the lock. It didn't turn. I pulled it out, checked the teeth. Yes, this was my house key, the one I'd used that morning when I left for the grocery store. I tried again. Nothing. Before I could process what that meant, the door swung open from the inside. Jeremy Roth stood in the doorway. He was home early. He was almost never home early. He was wearing the gray Henley I'd bought him for Christmas, the one that made his shoulders look broad and his dark hair was damp from a recent shower. He didn't meet my eyes. "Naomi," he said, "we need to talk." Behind him, the house was quiet. Too quiet. No renovation crews, no drop cloths, just my husband, standing in the doorway of the house we'd bought together, looking at a spot just above my left shoulder. "What's going on?" I asked. "Let's get Teddy settled first." He stepped aside. "Buddy, why don't you go upstairs and play in your room for a bit? Daddy and Mommy need to talk." Teddy, sensing permission to escape adult conversation, bolted up the stairs without a backward glance. Stayed on the porch. "Jeremy, the lock. Why did you change the lock?" "It's part of the surprise." He finally looked at me, and his smile was the same smile I'd fallen in love with 6 years ago, warm, a little crooked. The smile that had convinced me to trust a man who asked for a paternity test before he'd agreed to marry me. "I've got a big surprise for you." The renovation that wasn't the surprise, Jeremy explained, was a full home renovation. New floors, new paint, a kitchen remodel, the works, a belated anniversary gift. The lock had been changed, he said, because he didn't want the contractors having a key to the house. Made sense, sort of, almost. But then he led me into the living room, where 3 matching leather suitcases stood near the sofa. My suitcases, the ones Wed bought for our honeymoon to Cabo. I packed for you, he said, everything you need. You'll stay at my parents' old apartment while the work is being done. Just a couple of weeks. I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. You packed for me? Without asking? I wanted it to be a surprise. Where's my orgone crystal? The one for my nightstand? He frowned, genuinely confused. The pyramid thing? It's in the side pocket of the blue suitcase. I remembered. That small detail that had thought to pack my crystal, the little quartz pyramid I used for meditation, made me hesitate. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe this really was just a renovation. Jeremy was impulsive. He'd surprised me with the house itself, with the Lexus, with the ring. Surprise renovations were not out of character. But when he dropped me at his parents' old apartment an hour later, with Teddy staying behind at the house just for tonight, he didn't kiss me goodbye. He carried the suitcases inside, gave me a nod that felt like something you'd give a business associate, and drove away. I spent the first night unpacking in silence. The apartment smelled of dust and mothballs. The sheets in the linen closet were stiff with age. As I shook out the contents of the first suitcase, my hand closed around wool. I pulled it out, my winter coat, the heavy one I'd bought at Bloomingdale's last November. It was April on Long Island, with temperatures in the 60s. Why would Jeremy pack a winter coat for a two-week renovation? Sat down on the bare mattress and held the coat in my lap for a long time. Outside, a tree branch scraped against the window, and I nearly screamed before I realized what it was. Monkey videos. The next evening, I brought Teddy to the apartment. Wed spent the day at school, then ice skating, then picking up takeout from the vegan place Jeremy hated. I was trying to make it feel like an adventure. Teddy was full of questions I couldn't answer. Why are we here? Where's Daddy? When are we going home? And I was running out of cheerful evasions when the doorbell rang. And now, Jeremy stepped inside, carrying only his briefcase. No overnight bag, no clothes for Teddy. He looked at me, then at the apartment, then back at me. Naomi, I need to talk to you alone. For real this time, Teddy was already glued to my hip, sensing the shift in atmospheric pressure. Jeremy knelt down to his son's level and said the words I'd only heard him use once before, when his mother died. Buddy, go in the bedroom and watch monkey videos. I need to talk to Mommy. Monkey videos. Their emergency code. Teddy's eyes went wide, but he nodded. He trusted the code. 5 minutes later, he was in the bedroom with the door closed, YouTube autoplaying a series of chimpanzee clips he'd seen 100 times. Jeremy and I stood in the tiny kitchen. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. There's no renovation, he said. I didn't move. I want a divorce. The words hit me like a flat palm to the chest. I could feel my heart beating against it, trying to push through. You what? My voice came out in a whisper. Jeremy, what are you talking about? I'm not happy, Naomi. I haven't been happy in a long time. I've thought about this. It's not a snap decision. We can go to counseling. We can... No. His voice was calm. Too calm. The voice of a man Wood rehearsed. It's too late for that. You have the prenup. You'll be taken care of. The prenup. The document I'd signed without a lawyer because I was pregnant, because I was 37, because Jeremy was the first man Wood ever looked at me like I was enough and I hadn't wanted to ruin it by questioning his terms. Is there someone else? I asked. He hesitated. For half a second, just long enough his eyes flicked away before he said, No. I knew then. I didn't believe it yet. But my body knew. My stomach dropped like an elevator with a cut cable. The other woman. 2 days later, I got the lawyer email. Lenny Hardwick, the best divorce attorney on Long Island, kindly requesting I direct all future communications to his office. I drafted a reply saying Jeremy and I were working things out, that there'd been a misunderstanding. I never sent it. Then my mother called. There's another woman, she said, before it even said hello. There's always another woman, Naomi. The only way you're getting him back is if you get rid of her. There's no other woman, Mom. Did you ask him? He said no. And you believed him? The same man who changed the locks on his own wife? I hung up, but her words burrowed in. That night, I lay awake and replayed every interaction Jeremy and I had had for the past 6 months. The late nights at work, the way Head started angling his phone away from me when texts came in, the coldness that had crept in so slowly I'd mistaken it for stress. At 11 o'clock, I got in my Lexus and drove to the house. The porch light was on. Parked in the driveway, behind Jeremy's BMW, was a beige Jetta with a cracked rear fender. I pulled over half a block away and killed the engine. My hands were shaking. I don't know what I planned to do, knock on the door, demand answers, beg him to come home, but before I could decide, the front door opened. Jeremy stepped onto the porch with a woman. She was young, younger than me, with long dark hair that caught the porch light like polished obsidian. She was laughing at something Head said, her head tilted back, her hand resting on his forearm. Then he kissed her. Not a peck, not a friendly goodbye. He kissed her the way he used to kiss me, back when we were new, when everything was urgent. One hand cupped the back of her head. Her fingers tangled in his shirt. I was out of the car before I knew I was moving. My heels clicked on the pavement. They didn't hear me until I was at the bottom of the porch steps. Jeremy. They broke apart. The woman, the girl, really looked at me with calm, flat eyes. No surprise, no guilt, just a kind of clinical assessment, like she was reading a menu and deciding what to order. Naomi, Jeremy said. His voice was steady. He didn't apologize. This is Veronica. I know what she is. I looked at the woman. How old are you? She smiled, just barely. 28. I'm 42, I said, as if that were an accusation. Jeremy stepped down from the porch, putting himself between us. I'm in love with her, Naomi. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but it doesn't change anything. The divorce is happening. I looked past him at Veronica. Her eyes hadn't changed. There was no love in them, I was sure of it. She wanted something from him. I didn't know what, but I knew it wasn't love. I turned and walked back to my car. In the rearview mirror, I watched the two of them retreat into the house. The beige Jetta sat in my parking spot in its cup holder, visible through the window, a straw poked out of a fast food cup. The tip of the straw was stained coral pink. Served. 3 afternoons later, I stood outside Teddy's school with the other mothers, waiting for the kindergarten dismissal. Cheryl and Ashlyn were discussing lunch period reform. I was nodding along, making the right noises, pretending I hadn't spent the morning Googling how to save a marriage when your husband is in love with someone else. A man in a windbreaker approached our cluster. He was holding a manila envelope. Naomi Roth? I turned. Yes? He pressed the envelope into my hands. You've been served. Every head on the sidewalk swiveled toward me. Cyril and Ashlyn stepped back, two synchronized flinches, as if divorce might be contagious. The process server nodded once and walked away. I stood there, holding the envelope, while the other mothers studied the pavement, their phones, the sky, anything but me. That's when the divorced mother appeared beside me. She was a legend at the school. She'd shredded her hedge fund husband's prenup in a single afternoon of litigation and reportedly made him cry in open court. She was also the only person looking at me with something other than pity. Her name was Cora Jansen. You're going to need a lawyer, she said. A good one. Stephanie Gorman. I'll text you her number. I don't need a lawyer, I said. Jeremy and I are going to work this out. She gave me a look that said she'd heard that exact sentence from a dozen women before me and watched every single one of them eat it. Take the number anyway. I took it. I tried to see Jeremy at the house that evening. His babysitter, Rosita, opened the door and blocked the entrance with her small, solid frame. Mr. Roth is not receiving visitors tonight, she said, and I knew from the tightness in her voice that Jeremy had given her explicit instructions. When I got back to the apartment, the door was ajar. I hadn't left it that way. I was certain of it. I pushed the door open with 2 fingers and stood in the threshold, listening. Nothing. No footsteps, no breathing. But in the bathroom, the shower curtain was drawn. I never left it drawn. In the kitchen, a knife from the wooden block on the counter was missing, and when I checked the sink, there it was, lying in a shallow puddle of water among a few stray coffee grounds. I should have called the police, I know that now, but I was embarrassed that my life had become the kind of life where a woman calls the police because her shower curtain is in the wrong position. I locked the door, pushed a chair under the knob, and didn't sleep. A lawyer with a messy office. The next morning, I called Stephanie Gorman. She was polite, regretful, and already retained by my husband. He's locked up every top attorney on the island, she said. It's a classic move, prevents the spouse from finding representation. But she gave me a name, Ezra Fletcher, and a business card with a corrected phone number scribbled on the back. Ezra Fletcher's office was on the third floor of a building that smelled like old carpet and ambition. The reception area was empty. No assistant, no waiting chairs that weren't stacked with manila folders. The man himself sat behind a desk buried under so much paper I couldn't see the wood grain. He was maybe 50, with graying temples, a rumpled blazer, and eyes that were sharp despite the chaos around him. He didn't stand when I came in. Naomi Roth. Stephanie said you'd be comin'. He gestured vaguely at the chair across from him. Sit wherever you can find space. I sat on the edge of a folding chair, clutching my purse. I don't want a divorce. I want to save my marriage. The lawyer shrugged. That's not what I do. He pulled my prenup from somewhere in the paper drift and flipped through it. Then he laughed, a genuine, surprised laugh. This thing is a mess. He coerced you into signing it, right? No lawyer? He really thought this would hold up? He tossed it onto the keyboard of his computer. Naomi, your husband is an idiot. We're going to destroy him. I stared at him. I don't want to destroy him. You will. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small velvet bag. Now, before we go any further, you mentioned you're into crystals. I've been reading about them. Show me what you carry. For reasons I still can't explain, I pulled the orgone crystal from my purse and handed it to him. He held it up to the light, turning it slowly. Feels warm. He dropped it into his pocket. I'm keeping this for good luck. Don't worry, you'll get it back when we win. I should have been offended. Instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. The first mediation. The mediation session was held in a conference room that smelled of lemon polish and bad faith. Jeremy sat across the table with Lenny Hardwick, a man whose face seemed permanently arranged in a sneer. I sat beside my lawyer, who had managed to find a clean shirt but clearly hadn't slept. He kicked things off by producing a bank statement. Mr. Roth moved all the money out of the joint accounts 5 days before mediation. The balance at one point was $25. That's not true, Jeremy said. The money is in the accounts. It is now, he said, because you put it back the night before this meeting to make it look like it never left. I have the transaction timestamps. Hardwick's sneer flickered. Jeremy's jaw tightened. Then they dropped the real bomb. My client is seeking full custody, Hardwick said. The room tilted. Full custody? I heard myself say. On what grounds? Jeremy cleared his throat. Naomi has been unreliable with pickup times. She missed Teddy's pickup by an hour last month. She shows erratic behavior. And he pulled out his phone. She's been threatening Veronica. I stared at him. I've never threatened anyone. Veronica says otherwise. Ezra put a hand on my arm before I could lunge across the table. Your Honor, there was no judge. Well, address these baseless accusations in due course. In the meantime, Mr. Roth, would you like to explain the $500,000 offer you just made to my client in exchange for full custody? Hardwick's head swiveled toward his client. He hadn't known. The mediator called for a break. In the parking lot afterward, I watched Jeremy and Veronica kiss beside the BMW. When Jeremy went inside, Veronica walked over to where I was standing. I hope you'll come to Teddy's birthday party, she said. Sunday. I'm planning it. You're planning my son's birthday party? Someone has to. She smiled the same flat smile from the porch. Jeremy asked me. I'd be happy to have you there. As a guest. She walked away before I could respond. I pulled out my phone and photographed her license plate. Veronica's past. The divorced mother from the school called me back within the hour. The plate belongs to a Veronica Chesson. Last known address in Scarsdale. She's got a drug possession charge on her record. Pause. Heroin. I sat down hard on my apartment sofa. Heroin, track marks and everything. What are you going to do? What I did was drive 2 hours to Westchester County. The mansion in Scarsdale was exactly the kind of place you'd expect a wealthy older man to live. Stone facade, manicured hedges, a fountain that probably cost more than my car. The housekeeper who answered the door was maybe 60, wary, with the kind of exhausted eyes that come from decades of other people's messes. I lied. I said I was doing a background check for employment purposes. I said Veronica Chesson had applied for a position working with my children. The housekeeper's face darkened. You don't want her anywhere near your kids, ma'am. Why not? She glanced over her shoulder, then stepped outside and pulled the door mostly shut behind her. She worked here as a live-in helper. My boss, Mr. Symington, took a liking to her. His wife, Rona, was sick, needed care. Veronica was supposed to be helping her, but she shook her head. She was after Mr. Symington. Everyone could see it. And then Rona fell down the stairs, broke her hip, nearly died. My mouth went dry. You think Veronica pushed her? I can't prove it, the housekeeper said, but I know what I know. I drove home with both hands locked on the wheel, my mind racing, a heroin addict, a woman who may have tried to kill her boss's wife, and this woman was planning my son's birthday party. The elephant and the poison. I decided to tell Jeremy everything. I'd show him the background check, the housekeeper's testimony, the drug charge. He'd have to listen, had have to protect Teddy. I went to the house the next day when I knew he'd be there. Teddy was playing in his room. I cornered Jeremy in the kitchen and laid it all out: Veronica's arrest, her track marks, the housekeeper's accusation. Every word felt like pulling a splinter. Jeremy listened. His face didn't change. When I was finished, he said, I know about her past. She told me. She's been clean for years. And none of that changes the fact that you've been following her, harassing her, threatening her. I haven't. She showed me the texts, Naomi, the phone calls. She's terrified of you. What texts? What calls? I never. But he was already walking toward Teddy's room. I'm checking on our son. I followed him. Teddy's room was a disaster of action figures and half-built Lego structures. Jeremy opened the top drawer of Teddy's dresser, the one where Teddy kept his special things, and let out a sound I'd never heard him make. He pulled out the elephant. Veronica had given Teddy a stuffed elephant a few weeks earlier. Teddy loved it, had named it Stompy and slept with it every night. But the elephant Jeremy was holding now was unrecognizable. A kitchen knife had been driven through its chest, splitting the fabric. White stuffing puffed out around the blade. Something red ketchup? Paint? Coated the knife and the torn interior. You did this, Jeremy said. His voice was shaking. You came into this house and you did this. I didn't. Jeremy, I swear to God, I didn't get out of my house. I stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the mutilated toy, and realized with a cold, creeping certainty that Veronica had done this. Veronica had a key to my apartment. I'd seen it on her keychain. She'd been inside my home. She'd taken the knife from my block, the same knife I'd found in my sink, and she'd used it to frame me. Later that night, back in my apartment, I went to the bathroom cabinet for Tylenol. The bottle was nearly empty. I'd bought a 50-count bottle 2 weeks earlier. I'd taken exactly 2 capsules for a headache. But when I shook the bottle, only 3 rattled inside. I thought about the kombucha, the homemade batch I'd been drinking all week. The night I'd vomited until my stomach was empty, blaming bad fermentation. Veronica wasn't just framing me. She was trying to kill me. The second mediation. At the next mediation session, I couldn't hold it in anymore. When Hardwick started in about my emotional instability and Jeremy held up a photo of the stabbed elephant, I stood up. She poisoned me. Everyone stopped talking. Veronica, I said. She laced my kombucha with something. Tylenol, I think. I threw up. My voice cracked. She's trying to kill me so she can have Jeremy and Teddy. Hardwick looked at Jeremy. Jeremy looked at the ceiling. The mediator called for a regroup. But then Ezra spoke. Your Honor, since we're discussing character, I'd like to enter into the record the arrest report for Veronica Chesson. Heroin possession, track marks, a documented history of drug abuse. If anyone's fitness to be around a child is in question, it's hers. Hardwick's mouth opened and closed. Jeremy's face went red. The mediator adjourned the session. Afterward, the lawyer warned me not to make accusations I couldn't prove. It makes you look unstable, he said. But he gave me a high five on the way out, and I felt, for a moment, like I wasn't completely alone. Removing the wedding ring. The day before Teddy's birthday party, my lawyer came to my apartment for a house call. We'd started doing that meetings over Chinese food, the pretense of professionalism wearing thin. Had been carrying my quartz crystal in his pocket for weeks. He pulled it out and set it on the table between us like a centerpiece. You need to stop wearing your wedding ring, he said. I looked down at my hand. The morganite stone caught the light. Jeremy already told me that. Jeremy's an idiot. But he's right about this. The ring makes you look like you're still hoping. Juries don't like hope, they like resolve. I twisted the ring off my finger. It left a pale band of skin where the sun hadn't touched in 5 years. He picked up the ring and examined it. Pretty, he said. Then he looked at me. You're beautiful. You know that? I didn't know what to say. No one had called me beautiful in a very long time. He stood up abruptly. I should go. I'd get disbarred if I said anything else. The party and the betrayal. The birthday party was at the house. Jeremy had told me not to come. I came anyway. The backyard was transformed balloons, a bouncy castle, a cake shaped like a volcano for the rock-obsessed birthday boy. Teddy saw me arrive and ran over, face bright with joy, and for a single moment everything was worth it. Across the lawn, near the drink table, a woman I recognized stood talking to Veronica. It was Cora. She was holding a glass of wine, chatting with the other woman like they were old friends. When our eyes met, she had the decency to look away. "You're here," I said, walking up to her. "You knew I wasn't invited. You knew how much this meant to me. My son wanted to come," the divorced mother said. "It's just a party, Naomi." I turned away. I found a corner near the fence and drank 3 glasses of cheap Chardonnay, waiting for the cake. Waiting for the moment I could sing happy birthday and leave with some scrap of dignity intact. But before the cake, Jeremy exploded out of the house, his face twisted with rage. Veronica trailed behind him, holding a smashed box. It was a robot car, the gift Veronica had bought for Teddy. The box looked like it had been beaten with a rock. "You did this," Jeremy shouted, loud enough for every parent in the yard to hear. "You came into our home and destroyed her gift." "I'm calling the police. I didn't touch her gift," I said, but my voice was too quiet. I'd had too much wine. I sounded guilty even to myself. The arrest. When the officers arrived, Veronica was standing with her arm around Teddy, who was crying, sobbing, his small face red and frightened. The lead officer took one look at the scene. The hysterical son, the devastated girlfriend, the estranged wife with alcohol on her breath. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to come with us." "For what? I haven't done anything." "Trespassing, and if you don't cooperate, obstruction." I didn't cooperate. I argued. I demanded to see Teddy. I told them Veronica was a liar, a drug addict, a would-be murderer. I told them I was the victim here, the real victim, the only one who understood what was happening. The officer pushed me face first onto the picnic table. A cup of juice tipped over, spreading a purple stain across the tablecloth. I felt the cold bite of handcuffs close around my wrists. The last thing I saw before they walked me to the squad car was Veronica's face. Jeremy had his back turned, talking to another officer. Veronica met my eyes across the yard and smiled, a tiny, private smile, there and gone in an instant. Then the car door closed, and I was alone. At the station, they booked me, printed me, and put me in a holding cell that smelled of bleach and old sweat. I called my lawyer Collect. He arrived 4 hours later, looking like he'd been dragged out of bed, which he had. "Trespassing and obstruction," he said, as we walked out into the gray morning light. "Not the worst charges I've ever seen, but not nothing. And Jeremis filed for a temporary protective order." "A protective order?" My voice came out hoarse. "Against me? It's standard." "Hez claiming harassment. The hearing's in a few weeks. Until then," he rubbed his eyes, "you can't go near Teddy. You can't go near the house. You can't contact Jeremy or Veronica." "Ezra, she's dangerous. She tried to poison me." He held up a hand. "Naomi, stop. I know you believe that, but right now you have an arrest record, a protective order against you, and a judge who's going to look at you and see a woman who showed up drunk to a party she wasn't invited to and made a scene. You need to stay out of trouble. You need to look sane. Can you do that?" I nodded, but I wasn't listening anymore. I was thinking about the kombucha, the knife in the sink, the elephant, the Tylenol. Veronica was smarter than I'd given her credit for. Shed already won Jeremy, the house, Teddy, the birthday party crowd, all of it. But I wasn't finished. I couldn't be finished. Because if I was finished, Teddy was alone with her. My mother's voice rang in my head. "The only way you're getting him back is if you get rid of her." I called my mother the moment I got home. She listened without interrupting as I told her about the arrest, the protective order, the framing. "You know what you have to do now," she said. The same thing we did a long time ago when you needed help. What are you talking about? You take care of it, she said. You get rid of her. I remembered then the aunt would threaten to report my mother to the state, how Shed stopped visiting after that one weekend, how no one ever spoke her name again. The same thing. I understood now exactly what my mother meant. I didn't ask her to explain. I already knew. The next morning, I learned that Jeremy had left for a business trip to Boston. Had be gone for 2 days, and Veronica would be at the house alone with Teddy. I picked up my keys and walked out the door. Episode 2, The Rock and the Cellar. The drive to the house felt like sliding down a rope I couldn't let go of. Every rational thought told me to turn around Ezra's voice, the protective order, the arrest still raw on my record. But underneath those thoughts was something older and colder, a voice that sounded like my mother's. You get rid of her. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a weapon. I had my keys, my car, and the knowledge that Jeremy was 300 miles away in Boston while Veronica, the woman who'd poisoned me, framed me, taken my husband and my son, was alone in my house with Teddy. I parked 2 blocks away and walked. The April air was still cold enough to bite. No cars in the driveway except the beige Jetta with its cracked rear fender. No Jeremy. I stopped at the edge of the walkway and looked down. There was a rock, half buried in the flower bed, about the size of a grapefruit, heavy and jagged on one side. I don't know why I picked it up. At the time, I told myself it was an excuse if Veronica questioned why I was there. I could say I'd found it, that it belonged to Teddy's rock collection, that I was just dropping it off. The lie was thin, but it was enough to get my feet moving up the front steps. I rang the bell. She arrives with a rock and a lie. Veronica opened the door. She was wearing yoga pants and one of Jeremy's old Harvard sweatshirts, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked young, rested, comfortable in my home. When she saw me, her expression shifted from neutral to wary. Naomi, you're not supposed to be here. I held up the rock like a hall pass. I found this on the walkway. It's Teddy's. He's been looking for it. She didn't move from the doorway. You can give it to me. I'll make sure he gets it. I'd rather give it to him myself. Is he upstairs? Jeremy said you're not allowed to see him. The protective order hasn't been finalized. The hearing isn't for weeks. I tried to step forward. She didn't budge. I just want to say hello. 5 minutes. He's watching a movie. Her voice had an edge now. You should go. Then I said something I hadn't planned. Jeremy asked me to pick him up. Veronica's eyes narrowed. What? We talked last night. The lie came out smooth, lubricated by desperation. He said since he's away, it would be okay for me to take Teddy for the evening. He didn't want you to get stuck babysitting. Jeremy didn't mention anything about that to me. I shrugged, trying to look casual while my heart pounded against my ribs. I don't know what to tell you. He asked me to do this, and Teddy's going to be upset if he misses out on spending time with me. I brandished the rock slightly, as if it proved something. You don't want him crying all night, do you? I watched her face. The uncertainty, the calculation. She wanted me gone, that much was clear, but she also didn't want to make a mistake. Didn't want to anger Jeremy by refusing something he might have actually agreed to. This doesn't sound right, she said finally. I'm going to call Jeremy and check. She turned and walked back into the house. And that was the moment. The moment when the rope had been sliding down ran out and there was nothing below me but air. If she called Jeremy, had tell her the truth that we hadn't spoken, that I was violating the protective order, that she should call the police. I'd be arrested again, and this time, with a violation on my record, no judge in the world would let me near Teddy. I followed her inside. She was halfway to the kitchen, phone already in her hand, thumb swiping to find Jeremy's contact. Veronica, wait, she didn't turn around. I'm just going to check. If he said it's okay, then. The first blow and Teddy calls down. I hit her. The rock connected with the back of her skull with a sound I will never forget. A wet, heavy crack, like a melon dropped on concrete. Veronica's arms went loose. The phone clattered to the hardwood floor. Her body folded forward, knees buckling, and she landed face down on the rug in the living room. I stood over her, gripping the rock with both hands, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. There was blood on the rock. Blood on my hand. Not a lot of blood, but enough. Mommy? Teddy's voice floated down from the top of the stairs, high and curious and utterly innocent. A 5-year-old Wad heard a loud noise and wanted to know what it was. I shoved the rock behind a throw pillow. "Everything's fine, sweetie." My voice came out shockingly normal. "Mommy just dropped a dish. Stay upstairs and keep watching your movie, okay?" "Okay." Footsteps retreating. The sound of his bedroom door closing. I stood in the living room of the house that used to be mine, staring down at the unconscious body of the woman who had taken it from me. Veronica's chest was rising and falling. She was alive. I hadn't killed her. Not yet, not accidentally. But I had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Assault. Breaking and entering. Violation of a protective order. Ezra's voice. "You need to stay out of trouble. You need to look sane." I had just set fire to every legal bridge I had left. But Teddy was upstairs. Teddy was still here, still mine, and as long as Veronica was unconscious on the floor, I had time. Securing Veronica in the wine cellar, I knelt beside her and rolled her onto her back. Her face was slack, peaceful almost, a thin trickle of blood threading through her blonde hair and onto the rug. I checked her pulse, steady. Then I picked up her phone. Her thumbprint unlocked it. I went to settings and disabled the auto lock, keeping the screen alive. Then I opened her messages with Jeremy and started to read. "Miss you already. Me too. Teddy asked about you at dinner. Give him a kiss for me. He's already asleep. Call you tomorrow? Can't wait." Disgust rose in my throat. They talked like a married couple, like parents. While I sat alone in a dusty apartment, barred from seeing my own son, I typed a new message. "Everything's fine here. Don't worry about us. Focus on your trip." The reply came almost instantly. "Thanks. You're the best. Love you." I didn't bother responding. I pocketed the phone and turned my attention to Veronica. She was still out. I needed to secure her before she woke up. In the pantry, I found a roll of duct tape damp from the humidity. Its adhesive weakened, but still usable. I wrapped it around her wrists, 7 or 8 tight loops, then did the same with her ankles. I pulled a strip across her mouth and pressed it down hard against her cheeks. Then came the problem of moving her. Veronica was slim, but dead weight is dead weight. I grabbed her under the arms and dragged her across the living room floor, through the kitchen to the door of the wine cellar. The cellar was Jeremy's project, temperature controlled, lined with racks of bottles had been collecting since before we met. Bottles Head always said were investments. The stairs were steep and narrow. Getting her down was ugly. I had to half drag, half roll her, her bound body thumping against each wooden step, her head lolling. By the time I reached the bottom, sweat was dripping into my eyes and my lower back screamed in protest. I left her on the cold concrete floor among the wine racks, the air chilled to 55 degrees and smelling faintly of cork and oak. That was when I went back upstairs to check on Teddy. Footnote. He was exactly where I'd left him, cross-legged on his bed, absorbed in a cartoon. I stood in his doorway for a moment, watching the blue light flicker across his face, memorizing the curve of his cheek, the way his fingers curled around his favorite blanket. I had done this for him. Everything I was doing, everything I would do, it was all for him. I closed his door gently and went back to the cellar. Veronica was awake. Her eyes found me the moment I stepped off the last stair. Above the strip of duct tape, they were wide and wet and terrified. She was trying to say something, but the tape reduced her words to muffled grunts. Shed managed to sit up against one of the wine racks, her bound hands twisting uselessly behind her back. I stood over her and felt nothing, or not nothing exactly, but a strange, calm distance. As if the woman on the floor wasn't quite real to me anymore. She was a problem to solve, not a person to pity. "You took my life," I heard myself say. "My husband, my home, my son. Did you think I was just going to let you?" She shook her head frantically, tears streaming down her face, soaking into the tape. "I'm not going to kill you." The words came out before I decided them. "I'm not like you, but I am going to even the score." She cuts off Veronica's hair. I went back upstairs to the kitchen. In the knife block on the counter, the same knife block that had been missing a blade the night I found my apartment door ajar, I located the boning shears. Long, sharp, surgical grade. Jeremy had bought them when he went through a phase of breaking down whole chickens. I tested the blades. They snipped cleanly through air. Back in the cellar, I knelt behind Veronica and gathered a fistful of her hair. She bucked and thrashed, screaming against the tape, but there was nowhere for her to go. I took the shears and began to cut. That blonde hair, that beautiful, perfect blonde hair that Jeremy had run his fingers through, that shed tossed over her shoulder when she smiled at me at the birthday party, that Teddy had probably touched while she read him bedtime stories fell away in uneven hanks. The shears were sharp enough that the cutting was easy, almost satisfying. A long strip came away in my hand. I dropped it on the concrete and took another. I don't know how long I worked. Long enough that my fingers cramped around the handles. Long enough that Veronica stopped fighting and just sobbed, her whole body shaking. When I was finished, her scalp was covered in patchy tufts and raw pink nicks where the blades had caught skin. Loose hair covered the floor around her like shed feathers around a plucked chicken. The woman who had been beautiful was now grotesque. I stood up, breathing hard, and dropped the shears. My hands were trembling, but it wasn't from fear. It was from something closer to exhilaration. I had done something. I had taken something back. The pregnancy discovery changes everything. Then I remembered her phone. I pulled it from my pocket. There were new messages. One from someone named Lola, time-stamped 20 minutes ago. Did you take the test? Veronica had replied before I took the phone. I must have missed it in my messages to Jeremy. This morning, waiting for results. Lola's next message was what stopped my heart. Let me know as soon as you hear. If it's positive, everything changes. I scrolled up, reading the earlier exchange, and the world tilted. Impregnant, Veronica had written. At least I think I am. Took a home test and it was positive. Going to the doctor to confirm. And Lola's response, does Jeremy know? Not yet. I want to be sure first. Then, more recently, it's positive. Impregnant. 6 weeks. Veronica is pregnant, I said aloud, as if testing the words. With Jeremiah's baby. I knelt there, the chill of the concrete seeping through my jeans, the smell of cork and old oak sharp in the cold air. Veronica's bound hands had stopped twisting. She was waiting for me to speak. Jeremy was building a second family. If this child was born, Veronica would never leave Teddy's life. My mother's voice, you have to get rid of her. I looked down at Veronica. Her eyes met mine, and whatever she saw in my face made her shrink back against the wine rack. She knew I knew. I scrolled further back through her messages. Messages to Lola. Messages to someone named Clay. Messages that painted a picture of a woman who had been strategizing for months. Pushing Jeremy to file for full custody. Encouraging him to cut me off financially. Telling him I was unstable, dangerous, unfit. She had engineered everything. Jeremy didn't know about the pregnancy yet. I found the proof in a text she had sent him just that morning. I have something important to tell you when you get back. Good news, I promise. Had responded with a heart emoji. Of course, I pocketed the phone and went back to the kitchen. This time, I grabbed the kitchen scissors longer, sharper, with orange handles, scissors that could cut more than hair. The plan was simple now, clear. I would disfigure her face, not kill her. I wasn't a murderer, but make her unlovable. No man would marry me for my looks would stay with a woman whose face was a roadmap of scars. She'd leave. Jeremy would come back to me. We'd be a family again. It was the only way. I was halfway down the cellar stairs, scissors in hand, when the doorbell rang. Ezra arrives uninvited. I froze. Veronica's muffled whimper from below. The doorbell again. Then a knock. 3 sharp raps that I recognized. The way someone knocks when they've been waiting and are losing patience. Ezra. I knew it before I reached the door. I knew it the way you know a phone is about to ring with bad news. I cracked the door open just enough to see his face, tired, worried, his cheap suit rumpled and his tie loosened. Naomi. Relief flooded his features. Thank God. What are you doing here? My voice was too high. I tried to modulate it, but the adrenaline was still singing in my blood. I went by your apartment. You weren't there. I figured you'd come to get your car. You said it was still parked here, right? So I waited, but you didn't come back, and I got worried. He was already pushing against the door, and I had to let him in. Are you okay? You look... He stopped. He was looking past me, into the living room, at the rug where Veronica had fallen. There was a smear of blood on the hardwood where I'd dragged her across the floor. Naomi. His voice dropped. What's going on? Nothing. I dropped a glass. I was just cleaning up. There's blood on your sleeve. I looked down. There was a dark, drying stain I hadn't noticed. And my hands, when had I last looked at my hands? There was blood crusted under my fingernails. Ezra, you need to leave. Where's Veronica? He was already moving, his eyes scanning the room, tracking the faint scuff marks on the floor that led toward the kitchen. Where's Teddy? Teddy's upstairs. His fine, Ezra. He pushed past me into the kitchen. His gaze swept the counter, the shears lying next to the knife block, the duct tape, the rock I'd left on the island. Then his eyes found the cellar door, standing slightly ajar. No, I said. He opened the door and looked down. The stairs descended into cool darkness. And from that darkness, a sound, a muffled, desperate keening that was unmistakably human. Oh my God. Ezra started down the stairs. Naomi, what did you do? I followed him. I didn't have a choice. The scissors were still in my hand. I'd forgotten I was holding them. We reached the bottom of the stairs together, and the motion sensor lights clicked on, illuminating the cellar in harsh fluorescent white. Ezra's death on the cellar stairs. Veronica was exactly where I'd left her, bound at the wrists and ankles, duct tape over her mouth, her head a ruin of hacked-off hair and bleeding nicks. She had managed to work herself partially upright against the wine rack. When she saw Ezra, her eyes went huge and she let out a sound that was half scream, half sob, all of it trapped behind the tape. Ezra's face went gray. He turned to me, and I saw something in his expression I'd never seen before. Not anger, not disappointment. Fear. Naomi, he whispered. What have you done? Shiz not what you think. You tied a woman up in a wine cellar and cut off her hair. His voice cracked. This is assault. Kidnapping. Do you understand what's gonna happen to you? To Teddy? I did this for Teddy. No. He was shaking his head, backing away from me, his hand already reaching for his phone. No, no, no. I have to call the police. I have to, Ezra. Please. I'm your lawyer. I can't. I have to report this. If I don't report this, I'm an accessory. I could lose my license. But he wasn't dialing. His hands were shaking too badly to unlock the screen. You need help, Naomi. You need serious help. He was standing at the foot of the stairs. 3 steps above him, I was blocking the only way out. And I realized, with a clarity that felt almost peaceful, that Ezra was going to destroy everything. If he called the police when he called the police, they would take Teddy. They would put me in prison. Veronica would get everything. My son, my house, my husband, the plan I'd made, the violence I'd already committed, all of it would be for nothing. I didn't think. I surged forward and shoved him. His foot caught the bottom step. His arms windmilled, phone flying from his grip and skittering across the concrete. For one frozen instant, his eyes met mine wide, believing, and then he fell backward. His head struck the sharp edge of the wooden stair. The sound it made was not the wet crack I'd heard when I hit Veronica. This was a duller, heavier sound, like a baseball bat hitting packed earth. Ezra landed at the bottom of the stairs and didn't move. I'm sorry, I heard myself say. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Veronica was screaming behind her tape, the sound high and thin and animal. Stumbled down the remaining stairs and knelt beside Ezra. His eyes were open, staring at the ceiling. A dark pool was spreading beneath his head, soaking into the concrete. I pressed my fingers to his neck, searching for a pulse. Searching, nothing. Ezra was dead. I killed him. I killed my lawyer. I killed the only person would believed in me, would called me beautiful, would kept my quartz crystal in his pocket for weeks. I killed Ezra Fletcher. And now there was no going back. There was no coming back from any of this. I don't know how long I knelt there. Long enough for the blood to reach my knees. Long enough for Veronica's muffled screams to fade into exhausted, hiccuping sobs. When I finally looked up, she was staring at me with an expression I didn't recognize. It wasn't fear anymore. It was hatred, pure, undiluted hatred, the kind that burns away everything else. Veronica reveals Teddy is her biological son. She was saying something behind the tape, the same word over and over, just barely audible. I crawled toward her and ripped the tape off her mouth in one violent motion. She gasped, choked, spat a strand of hair from her lips, and then she looked at me with those eyes, those hate-filled, tear-swollen eyes, and said the words that cracked the world in half. You stole my son. I went very still. Teddy, she said, her voice breaking but fierce. He's not yours. He's mine. I'm his mother. His real mother. You stole him from me, you sick, crazy. That's not true. I gave birth to him. The words were tumbling out now, a flood that had been dammed for too long. 6 years ago, in a bathtub in St. Louis. His father's name was Clay. He was an addict. We both were back then. But I loved that baby. I loved him more than anything. And then one day he was gone, just gone. And I spent 5 years looking for him. And then I found him. Here, with you. No, my voice didn't sound like mine. You're lying. You're trying to. I have a DNA test. It's on my phone. 99.99998% probability. 'Tis my son, Dominic. His name is Dominic. Dominic. Clay, St. Louis. My mother's house. The rest stop where I'd pulled over for gas 6 years ago on my way down to visit her. The ancient dented car I'd thought was broken down. The man passed out in the driver's seat with drug paraphernalia scattered across the passenger side, and in the back seat, wailing, a newborn baby wrapped in a dirty blanket. I hadn't meant to take him. Not at first. I was just going to call the police. But the baby was crying so hard, and the man was barely breathing, and there was a needle still sticking out of his arm. I picked the baby up to comfort him, and he stopped crying, just like that. He looked up at me with those dark liquid eyes, and he stopped crying. I told myself I was rescuing him. You want to know the truth? My voice came from somewhere far away. Fine, I'll tell you the truth. Veronica stared up at me from the floor, her face a mask of blood and tears and chopped hair. Naomi heard her own voice, flat and distant, starting the story. Naomi confesses the abduction. I found him in a car, I said, at a rest stop outside St. Louis. The man in the front seat was unconscious. Track marks on his arms. Paraphernalia everywhere. The baby was in the back, screaming. No one else around, so I took him. You took him. Veronica's voice was a ragged whisper. You just took him. I saved him. From junkies. From a life of he was mine. She lunged against her bindings, the veins standing out in her neck. I was clean. It'd been clean for months. Clay took him without telling me, and then he got high, and by the time I woke up, by the time I realized, she broke off, sobbing. I remembered the rest of it now. The things I'd pushed down for 6 years, buried so deep, I'd almost convinced myself they'd never happened. My mother. I'd driven straight to her house in St. Rao. Louis, the baby wrapped in my coat, still crying. Shed taken one look at him and understood. Shed always understood the things I couldn't say out loud. No one's reported a missing baby, Shed said, after checking the news and police blotters for 3 days straight. They didn't even take him to a hospital. There's no record he ever existed. And then, we can fix this. We've done it before. The before was something I didn't think about. Something from years earlier when I'd been young and stupid and desperate, and my mother had made a problem disappear. But this wasn't like that. This was a baby, a real, living, breathing baby who needed a mother. I'd always wanted to be a mother, but the doctors had told me it would never happen. Scarring, they said, probably from an infection I'd had years ago and never treated. Jeremy didn't know. We'd only been dating a few months, and I hadn't found the right time to tell him. But my mother knew, and when she looked at the baby in my arms, she saw what I saw, a second chance. The birth certificate was the easy part. My mother knew people. A midwife would sign anything for cash. A clerk who didn't ask questions. We registered him as Theodore Paxson, my last name. Not Jeremis, not yet. Born at home, no hospital records to contradict.